Budget and Finance Committee to order. We only have one item, the living wage discussion. And thank you, Tyler, for putting all this together. It's really comprehensive, just what we needed. So currently, everyone's making, current regular full-time employees are earning $50 an hour. And there's just a couple positions we would need to adjust the ranges for. And that's the first paragraph, right?
Correct, yeah, so on page 1, for all regular full-time employees, you have one position where you would have to increase the minimum to 15, and ultimately by changing that range, I would also recommend changing the library associate,
Okay.
just a little, but that would have no impact on the current pay rate
Right,
for the 2 employees in those positions.
okay, and then what about librarian and?
Once again, just to accommodate for the shift of the other 2, would also be librarian, but once again, that's just the minimum. I
it's
would
just
still
the
leave the
minimum,
max
okay.
the same.
I see.
So we would just
Okay.
bump the minimum up a little bit, at least have a $3 difference between the library associate and librarian. Librarians, we require a master's degree. That's not the case for a library associate, so
Okay,
I feel like at a minimum, we need a $3 difference there. And then the SRC program assistant, we would change that range, but once again, same with all the other positions,
so
it
this
doesn't
is
change the
zero
current.
fiscal impact.
Correct.
No.
So are we all okay with that? Sounds good, okay.
So you will just know the action that the board would take is when I bring the end of the year HR manual changes, it will reflect those ranges that I
But we're
present
not
to you.
going a full board with this?
Not necessarily, like, the action you'll take is in the pay ranges, which will be in the HR manual, so that would be your action.
Okay.
On this
Well,
particular
that-
item.
We'll make sure you highlight that.
I would, correct. Yeah, that would be one of the main bullet points in the memo,
Okay,
or as far as
so-
the reason why.
But I mean, would you wanna even put that in the memo with just our committee recommendation and not have the whole board like agreeing in concept to do that?
That's how I'd present it. I would say in the memo that all pay ranges are, the minimums are at least 15 for all regular, all-time
Okay,
employees
that's
based
fine.
on the JP&L
I'm just like with the
recommendation.
decision-making process.
Okay,
Okay, living wage for all employees, so once we start being more inclusive of everybody, did you have something?
Well, does the library have to approve the pay change for the?
the library board would also approve the pay ranges, but I've been working very closely
Okay.
with Rachel
Okay,
on
so
this,
that's-
so, yeah, that's, we're
Yeah,
prepared for
we
that.
wanna talk
Okay.
about the
Yeah.
library, the
Okay.
library issues,
Okay,
the issue.
okay.
So then if we broaden it to everyone, which wasn't necessarily my intention when I brought it up, because, I was thinking more like a full-time, if you have a full-time regular job, you should be making at least 15. But anyway, if we were to look at it, I mean, on the library side, it would have a big impact on the library side. Although when I talked to Tyler and Rebecca about that, Rachel, why don't you come sit here?
Okay.
Don't sit on the edge.
Great.
When
I get to be a part of it.
Yeah, sit down.
Great.
When I talked to Rachel and Tyler about it, I was like, well, you get this having to separate
Yeah.
everybody, and part of it is that there's so many different classifications, and in my mind, it's kind of a broader issue for the library board to think about, like, what they feel about the 15 an hour, and whether shelvers or aides, people who are in maybe less than 20 hours a week, is that something, I don't know, what do we think about that?
Well, that was sort of gonna be my question to you, was, is that necessary? Do you feel like, that would be beneficial to help you, recruit and retain better employees? I just would love to kind of hear your thoughts.
I don't think so necessarily. Our shelver position does have a lot of turnover, but it's a pretty niche kind of position in that it's kind of built for turnover. It's 8 to 10 hours a week. It's either high school students, it's UWM students, or it's people who are retired. And so that's typically the makeup. Those who like it really stay. I would like to, I don't think the $15 an hour is, would be my personal recommendation unless it was an initiative that the village
Right.
really wanted to move forward with. I sure wouldn't say no to $15 an hour for the staff, but, what I really like is, there's a final recommendation that's a little further down. I would like to, and this is on, our library board personnel committee, to look at how we can make a better step kind of increase for the shelver, because we do have
Yeah.
these people, I mean, they're at minimum wage, and yes, there's some built-in turnover there, but we have some people that have been in a position
Right.
for 2 or 3 years, and they're
Mhm.
making $748,
Mhm.
$771.
Mhm.
I'd really like to be able to say, you know what, at a 1 year mark, we
Mhm.
bump you $2.
Yep.
Yeah.
You know,
That's
that
a big
kind of
raise
thing.
from seven.
It's a
Right.
huge
Right.
raise,
Right.
but I mean, it really says, hey, now
We
you're a
value
sophomore at
you.
UWM,
Yep.
stay here for your next 2 years if it works, and,
Yeah.
so I'd like to look at something like that, which Tyler did, recommend kind of as a third option to consider for seasonals and shelvers.
Is
So
that-
and that library aide was kind of a unique position. That was a shelver who ended up, we needed a youth assistant, essentially.
Mhm.
And we really thought that we could mirror that somewhat. You can see that their rate is a little higher.
Mhm.
So the library clerk and senior library clerk are both minimum below 15. But there is what is the difference between, I mean, if we didn't have so many classifications,
Right.
it would be a little easier. What does the library clerk do that a library aide doesn't do?
Right, quite a bit. So the library aide doesn't work with the public, essentially, doesn't work at any desks. But we will, I think, also may piggyback on the RFP that you're doing for an organizational examination.
Mhm.
And I would love to have HR professionals. I value Tyler and my experiences so much in the structure, but it would really be great to have someone who can compare us to other municipalities, other libraries with comparable circulation, and take a closer look at the organizational structure. As far as what you're saying about flattening,
Mm-hmm.
you know, there's that challenge of trying to provide enough, some career ladder or some opportunities for advancement within an organization, and so that's some of where clerk and senior clerk arrived. The clerk, senior clerk does much of what the library clerk does, but also serves as a lead worker, does some scheduling of the shelvers, has more responsibilities and project work, essentially.
But I mean, could there, well,
Yeah.
I guess just that if each class as you go up encompasses duties of the class below,
Yeah, we would
I
have to
think,
look at it.
yeah, I mean, I
Closer.
think this is a bigger question that
Yes.
maybe your
Right.
personnel committee
Yeah, our
wants to look
personnel.
at in more
Mhm.
detail.
We'll dig in.
So I mean, I think for now, I mean, I'm okay. We are gonna be proposing some changes to two of the library positions, 3 actually.
Mhm.
So, but I'm okay with sort of taking a longer term, you know, maybe do it. I wasn't sure about the organizational study, but if you think that's good, doing the organizational study and then looking at, having you guys look at all these classifications and see what you think,
Yeah.
yeah.
The
That's
shelter
my
looks a
study.
little low.
But the shelter.
Shelter is low. You're
So can we-
competing against all, they
Yeah.
can go
Oh,
out
you
and get
bet.
jobs.
You bet.
So that's why the third proposal, or the core proposal is all regular full-time employees at 15 an hour, but all positions would be at least at 10 an hour. So by
Oh,
making that recommendation, we're stating that we would have a change in the rates for shelvers and seasonals.
right.
Which lately for DPW seasonals, we've been having a hard time recruiting
Right.
with how low that is too. So I show what the financial impact would be. And if that was a recommendation the JP&L committee wanted to recommend, I could talk with Mark and make sure that's included in the budget wrap up next week.
Mhm.
But I just wanted to give you a picture of what that financial impact would be.
So that's that 13,000.
Correct.
So, yeah, I mean, to me, I think that feels, you know, so all full-time employees would have a minimum of 15, and then these other part-time shelver and seasonal would be the minimum the minimum would be 10,
Mhm.
right?
Correct.
I mean, that's something I would definitely support.
It said the shelver would be a minimum of 10 and a max of 1040
12.
12.
or 12.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you
That's the
go to the
current
next
max.
page.
Yeah, no, I saw that.
Oh, you do,
Yeah.
okay.
But then, okay, and then the library aid is
No.
1040 to 13. Yeah, I mean, I think I'm okay with that too. I mean, but so Rachel, that makes sense to you?
Yeah.
Okay,
Does.
and then okay, and then we'll look at the rest of the library
Yeah.
positions next year.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
I like that. Yeah,
All right.
that's fair.
Thought it was a good phase
It gets-
approach.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that,
Yeah,
you're
there-
targeting, and it keeps people, and
Mhm.
you're able to recruit people.
I mean,
out of
$7.25 an hour. I mean,
It's,
when you make
It's
like
hard.
$50 working, you know,
Right.
it's ridiculous.
And there's a ton of seasonal shelter turnover too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and this will reduce
That's
it.
a lot.
And that will
Awesome.
reduce it, yeah, that's our number one turnover is with our shelters. So-
yeah,
Well, and there's a
So,
cost
rightfully
to,
so.
but there's a cost, right, to hire people
Oh, you
and
bet. And
train
then
them and all
training
that stuff,
is
and
very
so,
thorough.
yeah,
It's very
yeah.
detailed,
Yeah.
so.
okay.
So I think just for the sake of the meeting, if you wanted to entertain a motion, just so we have that on the record as far as with that third recommendation, which would be increasing the minimums of all regular full-time employees to $15 per hour and all employees to $10 per hour.
I would make that motion.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay,
So this, okay.
so that's so you'll add that onto the.
We'll add that
add
for budget
onto the
wrap-up.
budget list, okay,
Okay,
great. Well, we got through that, is it? We have 5 minutes left.
excellent, yeah.
Well,
It's
Thank you.
57. Next one's
Great.
57. We're ahead of schedule.
Shelters,
Can we start?
eight.
We gotta wait till it's done.
Happy day.
Oh, I don't know how you computed it, but it's,
Or the organization, oh, good, Rachel's here for organizational.
Yeah,
development.
if you have any other, we had 3 or 2
3
minutes for,
minutes, so
otherwise,
sit tight.
do you want me to pause the camera or you want me to just keep it going for the 2 minutes?
Unless it's easier for you.
It's, doesn't matter.
Why did Mark include all this budget stuff in her
Yeah, I was
packet?
kind of thinking that.
I don't know,
Too.
just to make sure you all received
We
it.
all got it, yeah.
Yeah, but I know he sent that separate email with all that
Yeah.
information anyways,
I
so
know, and now we get, I mean, it's
it lengthens the packet.
confusing to know which is which.
Can I ask a clarifying question then?
Mhm.
So, just so I understand correctly with the motion that you just had, then that pay range shift would be added to the HR manual and the pay ranges, and so that would be the time when both the library board and the village board would have the opportunity to approve that. And so that would be for the 3 positions, so the very first item, the, item that you move for with moving to $10 an hour for the shelter and the seasonal, that may not go through in 2020 in the HR manual and pay ranges, because that does have a fiscal impact for this upcoming year.
Yeah, it depends on next
So it
week's budget
depends
wrap
at the
up.
wrap up to
Yeah.
see if that 13,000 would make the
Maybe
cut.
2020.
Correct.
Okay,
Yeah.
I just wanted to make sure that I understood that and I relayed
Yeah.
that accurately.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah,
So Mark may need to get with you on your budget because,
Yeah, that'll make
Yeah.
some tweaks,
yeah,
so.
okay.
Hmm.
And Rachel, we'll have to talk offline, just so we can start, based on, after the budget wrap up, if that's okay, let's meet separately to kind of identify with your current
You bet,
staff and how that, with the shelters, how that would be done,
you bet.
okay?
Thanks, Tyler.
oh, yeah, you got that.
Yeah,
Roll
cause
on-
she has,
roll on
she has some
shoulders.
shelters that just started, and she has
Oh,
one that's
yeah.
been working, what, 15 years, are we up to now?
15
You have a
years.
Yeah.
shelter, who's been there
Shelter's been there
15
15
years.
years.
Is that a student or a retired?
A
Retired,
retired person.
And she's tired.
Oh,
How
she's
many
great.
hours a week is it? One day?
10,
10,
And how do they
5
schedule?
2-hour shifts.
Oh, that's nice, that's great.
I used to shelve at the Lake Bluff Library.
Oh,
I
what do you
really,
do?
yeah, it's such a great, it's like everything in
Oh, yeah.
order, and then you count the numbers, and you can find the right place, and then
Satisfying.
books are out of order, and you
Oh,
fix
yeah.
them, and yeah,
Yeah.
if you have that kind of ADD, it's great.
It's very,
You're great at that.
The problem was though, is like when you need bifocals, and you have to and then some of the books are way down low, so as you
Right.
get to be in your fifties, you're like, oh.
On your
You're like,
Oh,
"Ah,
still on
hard."
wheels.
That part is hard to do.
It's 7.
It is.
Okay, yep.
Yep.
All right, so we'll call the JP&L committee to order, and the first thing on our agenda tonight is the organizational analysis for RFP. So Sarah, do you want to start with that? Or
Yeah, I'll be
Sorry,
taking,
yeah,
I'll be
that's
taking
sorry.
it.
Yep.
So, last time we met, I think it was back in February, on this topic over at DPW. The guidance or the direction that you provided was for us to still put on the prioritization list for then 2020, but to develop an RFP. Because at that time, we were proposing the idea of doing it internally to try to save some costs, but after a discussion, there was a determination that if we were gonna go this direction, it'd be better coming from a third party that's neutral, that has more experience with these kind of studies and such a scope that's pretty comprehensive, that's gonna take up some time. So we generated this RFP to ask for some costs, cost estimates, and get a better idea of their approach to do an organizational analysis. So this org analysis focuses primarily on DPW, along with the Clerk and Customer Service Department and SRC, the Senior Resource Center. As Rachel alluded to, we ended up adding the library, which would be on the library's, is it the Friends of the Library or a
No,
separate
this
library board?
The library board would,
Would cover the costs
Yes.
of their section, so you'll see
ask
later in the
that to be funded
attachment.
separately or quoted separately.
Thank you, so in attachment A, you'll see that I have that separated out. So we'll see what the costs are for everything, and then just the cost for the library. So they'll separate those costs out, and then we'll make that determination later if the library is included.